Yo, I'm Bob. Been totally blind since birth, and I'm into Star Wars. The vehicles from Kenner and Hasbro help me visualize what you guys are looking at on screen. Remember to share, like, subscribe, hit the notification button. These things help the YouTube channel. So, I don't own the particular vehicle in the 3 3/4 inch line we're going to be talking about today. Consider this, and I wish Hasbro would make an all-new sculpt of that kind of a video. We're going to be talking about the Imperial Shuttle today. We saw this tri-winged work of art in Return of the Jedi. We saw it in Rebels and Rogue One. It's a fantastic, very magnificent looking Imperial vehicle. And it's about time we got an all-new sculpt. We did see this released in the 80s, or those of you who were on this earth in the early 80s, you probably had one if you were a Star Wars fan. And this was released in the mid 2000s, I believe, from the Saga collection. I owned the re-release in the mid 2000s. I owned it for about a year and a half. It just wasn't doing much for me. It was quite a bit smaller than I'd imagined in my head. I remember that boarding ramp was popsicle stick. Once you got it lowered and extended, you really couldn't fit your Saga collection or your Sith Evolutions Palpatine on the boarding ramp at all. There were no foot pegs. This was a straight up re-release of the 80s version, except they took away the battery compartment and the lights and the sounds and all that. It was the same exact mold though. I owned mine for about a year and a half, and I decided to sell it on eBay for pretty much, I mean, what I'd paid for in the store. I didn't want to scalp anybody, and I wanted somebody, to be happy with the shuttle. So I think I sold it for exactly what I bought it for. What would I want in an all-new sculpt of the Imperial Shuttle? Well, I'd want it to be more to scale. I'd want it to be larger. I'd want that boarding ramp to be wide enough to stand several figures on it. When you had it lowered and extended, I want foot pegs. So you could have Palpatine coming down that ramp there with his cane. You could have his royal guard fanning out behind him as he's going down the ramp. Or, you could have Vader and Stormtrooper standing on there. Like I said, I wanted a more detailed interior. Those of you guys who enjoy lights and sounds, yeah, we could bring those back. I enjoy sounds. You guys enjoy lights, I'm sure. You could have dialogue from the beginning of the movie in the all-new sculpt. You could have dialogue from the middle of the movie by flipping a little switch over to the right, onto another setting. So you could have phrases from Han, Luke, and Leia, as well as the phrases of Vader's pilot and co-pilot and all that. You could have flyby sounds, cannon sounds, to go along with your guns there on the wings and beneath the wings. You could have a retractable cannon in the back because that is able to extend and retract, I think. And let's see. Well, you'd have to have boarding ramp raising and lowering sounds because I'd want the boarding ramp on the new sculpt. I'd want that to be motorized, similar to the way it was on the Falcon. And you'd have to have some, I'm guessing, some landing lights once you had the ramp lowered. I always imagined that scene looked pretty cool when the ramp was lowering and you saw Vader walking down or the Emperor walking down. I was always a big fan of the of the freaking boarding ramp for some reason. I have no idea why when it comes to the shuttle, but I love that thing. Of course, your wings could raise and lower, so you could have it in landing mode and flight mode and all that. And you'd have a much more detailed cockpit. I did read that whenever troopers got bored in the Lambda-Class shuttles, they would scratch their TK numbers onto the walls and onto the benches and things. That would be a kind of a neat detail for Hasbro to do. Like they could paint some little scratched TK stormtrooper numbers in there on the walls and on the seats and things like that. Like so and so was here, stuff like that. That would kind of be neat. I don't know if we saw that in any of the films or not. You could maybe add some decals if you didn't want them on there. Am I missing anything from what I'd like to see in the new sculpt? Motorized boarding ramp, a much more detailed cockpit, maybe a couple of more buttons in there, a couple of view screens, more room in the passenger compartment. Speaking of more room, I was reading about the Sentinel-Class landing craft. and this is a much larger cousin of the Lambda. So I was thinking it would be pretty cool if we got two vehicles in one, since, well, it's just its identical cousin. So you could maybe draw upon the way they did the Naboo Star Cruiser from 1999. That ship, you could widen it from side to side to give yourself a bit more room in the interior. So you could have room to sit figures and stuff like that in there. So that would be really interesting if you could maybe elongate your Lambda and widen it side to side so you could turn it into a Sentinel-class landing craft. You know, you could expose more seating in there, harnesses on the sides. You could have some stormtroopers there standing in the inside of the craft, similar to the way they probably stood in the troop transport, on the inside of the ship, not on the outside, you know. The Sentinel-class landing craft, it had an additional ion cannon, so once you get your shuttle elongated and extended and all that, you could actually port another ion cannon or another weapon there into one of the, you know, some kind of a hole there in the top of the ship or wherever it goes. The Sentinel was more heavily armed. It also had concussion missile launchers, so you could actually port a couple of missile launchers wherever they go once you get your Lambda transformed into a Sentinel. You could have missiles that you could slide into your launchers. They wouldn't have to be spring-loaded, but just something to add to your display scene if you wanted to make it an action scene. You could have missiles coming out of the fronts of the launchers. So, I mean, if you're going to give them missile launchers, you might as well give them missiles too. Spring-loaded or not. Maybe you could do both. I don't know. The Sentinel class, it did have additional doors on the sides. You could have some more entryways. I think it had an additional ramp in the back. So there would be another motorized boarding ramp that you could have there. I think there were additional flight pods that it had, so you could actually have some vehicles. I don't know what vehicles these carried. I couldn't really get that information for certain. Maybe some speeder bikes or something like that. So I don't know how big this thing would have to be once you get it converted into a Sentinel class, because the cockpit, that also would have to be expanded. You'd have to detach your Lambda-class cockpit that seated two, and then you would attach your Sentinel-class cockpit. That would seat four, so your cockpit would be bigger too. And like I said, this 2-in-1 vehicle feature is just something I was noodling around in my head about last night as I was reading about the Sentinel-class. I mean, otherwise we might not ever see a much larger Sentinel landing craft. We did see this in Rebels, in quite a few episodes of Rebels, so it is canon, and it's, to me, it's a much more imposing shuttle. Something I'd like to see in terms of a 2-in-1 style vehicle. Since Hasbro does transforming vehicles anyway, I don't think it would take too much to really slide your shuttle around, extend it, elongate it on sides and at either end to make it much larger. Give yourself more room in there to seat a ton more stormtroopers, things like that. So now, I mean, what do you guys think? Would you want to see both made separately, or would you want a convertible Lambda into a Sentinel-class landing craft? Would you want a vehicle that was 2-in-1, more cost-effective, and something done right? I mean, so it would take years to make. I mean, I don't know. I'm no toy designer, by no means. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I liked the 2-in-1 idea in terms of getting both a Lambda-class and a Sentinel-class shuttle. So it's just a thought. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I wish Hasbro would make an all-new sculpt of that kind of a video. And let me know what you'd like to see in terms of new features and things like that in a new Imperial shuttle in the comments below. Or are you happy with the one that you've already got? Do you have a shuttle? Are you good with it? So that'll do, and I'll hear you guys in the next Star Wars related video. Have a great day.